I think South Africa has a fine reputation also in the international climate negotiations. You have some very, very strong people and a very strong team in this field. So there are many expectations that South Africa will be a perfect host of these talks. And that South Africa is using coal, I mean, who are not? Coal is in the world. What we're trying to do is to create a more green economy. And I know that that is also part of the agenda here in South Africa.
Well, Connie, how can we become a green economy? And this is what Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was talking about yesterday during his budget speech for the year. And talking about a green economy, some say that we can't be a green economy if we rely so much on coal. We know that coal-fired power plants are currently being built and other ones that have been mothballed are being reignited as well. How can we strike that balance?
It's of course very important that you don't take decisions now that will make it impossible to move in the direction of having a more green economy. But I basically believe we have no choice. We are now 7 billion people on planet Earth. At the middle of the century, when my children will be my age, we will be 9 billion people, all wanting a share in the good life. Of course, that requires a lot of energy, a lot of resources. So if developing countries and emerging economies create their wealth in the same way as the old industrialized countries did, then we simply will not sort of have enough resources. It will harm nature. So we must find more energy and resource efficient ways of creating the growth. I think we have plenty of examples that this is possible. We have done it in Europe, for instance, with having substantial increase of our GDP over recent years, but at the same time our emissions have dropped by 16% since 1990. So it is possible to have more production, but with less implications, negative implications for nature. And that's what we must all do, and what we must all do even better in the future.
So essentially it's about finding solutions to energy generation and other means of creating energy as well to bring down the emissions, as what we've been seeing in Europe. And one of the reasons that we have seen emissions dropping extensively in Europe is because when you go there, you see solar panels on each and every house. We had Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan talking about 800 million rand allocated to this green economy over the next 3 years. Do you think it's enough? And do you think perhaps we need to find other solutions, such as a solar panel solution going forward?
You know, I'm not a specialist in what is needed in South Africa, but I think it's very, very positive that the government sort of gives priority to this area, because I'm absolutely sure that in this country, as in so many other countries, there are huge potentials in, for instance, renewables that we have not explored yet. Not only in solar, it could also be in wind, it could be in biomass, it can be in a lots of fields where it will pay off in the long term to turn more into renewables. Let me just give a very current example. Oil prices these days and weeks are increasing significantly. I think that all the citizens out there understand that that makes their energy bill more expensive. It makes it more expensive to drive your car. So wouldn't it be wise if we had cars that emit less, that runs longer on a liter, and so on and so forth? I think that if we do this intelligently, then we can combat climate change. At the same time, we can improve our energy efficiency and energy security, and we can create new innovative jobs. I'm absolutely sure that there is also huge job potential in this agenda.
Well, in that sense, Connie, you need buy-in coming through from government, from stakeholders, from civil society as well, and business. And here we are talking about this, and we know what solutions can be put on the table, but at the end of the day, we're still importing vehicles which emit carbons. And we know we've got a new carbon tax here in South Africa as well to try and push consumers to buying vehicles that are far more energy efficient. But it's great talking about it, but you also need implementation. Do you think that we're capable of implementing this? And tell us about some of the challenges that Europe experienced in implementing some of these solutions that you're talking about.
If I can just give you one example, I know very well when I was Environment Minister in Denmark, we actually changed the taxation system of vehicles. And in less than 3 months, the whole consumer patterns changed from rather big cars to smaller cars. So yes, I think that what the South African government is doing now on taxation on cars, that is one way. And then of course regulators and politicians can also put up standards. That's also what we do in Europe. We say to the manufacturers of autos, of cars, by 2020 you have to have cars that emit only so and so much, and we have systems also to enforce it. And you know, manufacturers will always say, oh, couldn't we just wait, just 5 more extra, give us a bit more time, it's very challenging. But it always turns out in the end they can do it faster than they themselves believed, and it did not cost as much in investments as they thought. And we should also remember, when you do things like that, for instance with cars, then you also get cleaner airs, less air pollution. In other words, there are many co-benefits coming with addressing energy efficiency and climate challenges.
What are your thoughts on nuclear energy and the fact that we've had a lot of talk about the pebble bed modular reactor here in South Africa? It was put on hold and then it's reignited. It's obviously going to cost billions of rands to have this form of energy generation. So we are focusing predominantly on coal. What is your view on this? Do you think that nuclear is the way to go, given the fact that it is cleaner? Yes, it's dangerous in many senses, but it is cleaner for the environment.
You know, I think that in order to make the transition into a low-carbon society, we will have a whole variety of different energy sources, and nuclear will be part of that. But what really, really matters, that is that you take care that the security standards are 100% in order. When you do that, then people should not sort of be mistaken. Then nuclear is often a relatively expensive solution, for instance, compared to renewables. But nuclear will be in the world. It will be part of the whole energy mix in many countries. But as I said, security must be priority number one then.
Commissioner, also just looking at the mining industry here in South Africa, and we know the legacy that gold mining companies have left behind with water contamination. We've had other issues coming to the fore as well. We're very much focused on the resource side of things, and this is also a big, leaves a big footprint behind from a climate perspective. When you look at the footprint that we have left behind, a lot of money needs to be put back into the country to rehabilitate some of the land and to try and bring down those carbon footprints. When you look at the scenario in South Africa, do you think that we can get it right in 5, 10 or even 20 years? What kind of time frame have you put on this?
You know, I'm also here in South Africa to take part in the UN panel on sustainable and green growth. And one of the things we're going to discuss here today and tomorrow also with President Zuma, that is how can we internalize the costs related to our production. For instance, as you mentioned, it's not enough just to do your mining. You must also take into consideration the cost to nature and the cleaning up afterwards. In Europe, what we are doing is that we say if you want a permit to mine here or to have a manufacturer there, then you will have to clean up after yourself. That is sort of part of the condition. So my point is that it's very important to build that kind of conditions into your permits given to a given manufacturer, a given company, when they establish themselves in an area. That's the way to do it, I believe.
Commissioner, just to end off, how much money do you think we need to invest in climate change, in a green economy in South Africa going forward over the next 3 years? I mentioned 800 million rand has been allocated. Some say it's not nearly enough. Do you think that it's enough?
You know, I'm not going to comment on what you have to do in South Africa. South African governments and politicians will know that much better. I can only say that there is also very high costs related to doing nothing. If we globally just continue business as usual, our children will live in a much more polluted world. It will be much more difficult for nature to cope with all our consumption. And that is why we need to invest in this, in order to not only to do what is right, but it will also in the end turn out to be an economic benefit. We have just in Europe said, where do we need to be by 2050? How can we invest in the transition that is necessary? And our figures very clearly show that it also costs very, very much if we just continued business as usual. Business as usual is not an option.